Okay, here we go. But before I get to the players that I think are absolutely going to sign with a different team this offseason, I just want to go over a few players that I'm not quite sure on at the moment. We got Juan Soto, we got Corbin Burnes, we got Pete Alonso, and Jack Flaherty. Now, Juan Soto, I think there's a great chance he ends up staying with the Yankees. He's having the best season of his career in the Bronx this year. Him and Aaron Judge have been absolute maniacs in that lineup. He's going to get himself a fat contract this offseason. And hey, the Yankees, we know they got the money. They can definitely afford it. I think it makes just too much sense for him to stay in the Bronx for the rest of his career. Him in pinstripes, it just works. I think they're going to try everything they can to keep him in for the long haul. Now, Corbin Burnes, on the other hand, with the Orioles, this one's interesting because they have new ownership there. Seems like they're okay with, wanting to spend some money this coming offseason. Now, with Corbin Burnes, he has been everything the Orioles have wanted since trading for him last offseason. 29 starts, ERA at a 3.18, 3.72 on the FIP. He has been their ace this year. Now, when it comes down to Corbin Burnes and his market, there's going to be a lot of teams in that market. Now, I do think the Orioles are going to try and bring him back. We'll see. And, with the Orioles, though, you got to remember, they got a lot of young players they need to get signed up for the long haul as well. You got Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, a couple of guys, for example. They need to give those guys extensions, and they're going to get a lot of money. So will Corbin Burnes, fit into, the payroll for the future, with what the Orioles want to do? We'll just have to wait and see. I think it's a good chance the Orioles will bring him back. So I'm going to kind of pause for Corbin Burnes as of right now. Now, Pete Alonso with the Mets, this is also pretty interesting because with Pete Alonso, him and the Mets, they've been, seeming to try and get an extension done for a while, and nothing has really worked out at all. Now, with Pete Alonso, you could see him definitely going to a different team, I think. I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams that I think will look to add some additional power. Now, with the Mets, you got to remember they have Mark Vientos there, who's really stepped up this year. He could end up being their future first baseman, but I could still see a scenario where Pete Alonso, who loves it in Queens, he loves the Mets, I could still see him coming back there, whether or not, you have him play first base, but also DH as well. Defensively at first base, he has not been great. So you could have Vientos place him first. You could have Alonso DH or, whatever. They can share time back and forth. I would not rule out Pete Alonso staying with the Mets. And as for Jack Flaherty, just got traded to the Dodgers at the deadline this year. I think Jack Flaherty could absolutely stay with the Dodgers. He's originally from California, and he's pitched very well with the Dodgers. Adding Jack Flaherty back in the fold for the future, I definitely think is a realistic possibility. I also want to mention Shane Bieber and Walker Buehler. Bieber's been out all year after getting Tommy John surgery, so I could see a scenario where the Guardians bring him back on a short deal. But then again, maybe another team out there could be more motivated to bring him in than the Guardians. As for Buehler, he's been dealing with injuries this year, and his numbers are way down. I could see the Dodgers bringing him back on a short deal to prove himself, but I could also see another team being more motivated than the Dodgers to bring him in, because the Dodgers do have a good amount of pitching already, especially with guys coming back from injury next year. Let's start off with Alex Bregman, and once again, he's having himself another solid year. He's hitting .259, a .315 on base, a .447 slugging, a .116 WRC plus, 22 home runs, a 3.5 Fangraph wins above replacement. He's also playing some great defense this year, once again at third base. And over the last few years, he's been one of the top third basemen in the game. He ranks 6th overall in Fangraph wins above replacement among all major league third basemen. Now, as for Alex Bregman, I do think he is going to end up going to another team this offseason. When it comes to the Astros with free agency, they tend not to give out the big contracts. And we just saw the contract Max Chapman just got with the Giants. Alex Bregman is smiling ear to ear at this point, knowing he's about to get himself some big bucks. And I don't know if the Astros are going to dabble in that market. Now, last offseason, sure, they brought in Josh Hader and Jose Abreu a couple of years ago. We all know how that turned out. I just don't see the Astros really playing ball when it comes to a big contract, especially one maybe close to the range of what Max Chapman got from the Giants not too long ago. But I could definitely see some teams jumping in for Alex Bregman. You got the Diamondbacks. Who knows what happens with Eugenio Suarez? Has been playing very well in the second half here. So depending on what happens there, I could see the Diamondbacks jump in there. Maybe the Blue Jays, right? Former teammate George Springer there. Now, you'd have to figure out what to do with this infield, right? You got some younger guys like Will Wagner, Addison Barger, along with Bo Bichette. Let's see what happens with him. I think they end up trading him personally, so I could see the Blue Jays maybe getting involved there. You got the Detroit Tigers, former manager AJ Hinch is there, and yeah, the infield is a little crowded, right? You got Jace Young, Colt Keith. Now, I wonder what happens with Spencer Torkelson. He just came back up from the minor leagues recently, has not really been hitting all that well. I wonder if the Tigers possibly move on from Spencer Torkelson, so maybe you could move one of these guys to first base, and Alex Bregman has been taking reps at first base for the Astros before games, so, maybe they could work him in there. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Tigers get involved, and also, think about the Yankees as well. Depending on what happens with Juan Soto, that could open up a spot in the outfield. Jazz Chisholm can go back out to the outfield, or Gleyber Torres, if he ends up moving on, Jazz can move over to second, and then Alex Bregman can play some third base. Let's move on to his teammate, Justin Verlander. Now, Verlander's had a lot of ups and downs with the injuries this year. The velocity's down, the stuff is down. He's having the worst year of his career, in which he's made 10 starts. This year, 14 starts, ERA at a 5.30, FIP at a 5.09. Now, when he's healthy, I still think he could be a productive pitcher in the major leagues, even in his 40s. He wants to pitch until he's 45, but will that be with the Astros next year? Now, there's a couple of problems with the Astros. I think there's a slight chance he could still go back there because they have a great relationship. Maybe they could figure something out, but you got a lot of guys looking for time in this rotation, right? Framber Valdez, he's going to be a free agent after next year. Yusei Kikuchi is a free agent after this offseason. I would imagine they would like to bring him back at least on a 2-year, 3-year kind of a deal. He's been pitching great for them since coming over at the trade deadline. Blanco's really emerged this year. Eric Getty has had a lot of good moments this year. Hunter Brown is finally broken out this year. But then you got some guys coming back from the IL. Luis Garcia, he'll be back next year. He was supposed to come back around this time, but he's had a bit of a setback. But he should be good to go for next year. Lance McCullers Jr., look out for him as well. So you got a lot of guys here. Will he fit into what they got going on? I'm not quite sure. But with Verlander, there definitely will be some other teams out there, I think. You got the Texas Rangers, right? Nathan Eovaldi, he will be back for next year. But with Max Scherzer, he's probably going to go elsewhere. So maybe you could swap out Scherzer for Verlander. He could stay in Texas there. I could see that happening. Another veteran guy, with Kumar Rocker, Jack Leiter, probably going to be in the rotation full-time next year. I think that could end up being a good thing. We'll see. And I could see the Rangers being a bit motivated this coming offseason to try and get back to some competitive ways for next year. Now, we got the Dodgers. Verlander and the Dodgers, they've been connected in the past. His wife, Kate Upton, right? Hollywood. So maybe they can move back out there. I know they sold a home a couple of years ago, but who knows? Maybe you can go back there. The Dodgers, you got some guys that are going to be hitting free agency. I mentioned Jack Flaherty earlier. If he doesn't go back, maybe you could do Verlander on a 1-year kind of a deal. We'll see. Another team that I think could be interesting are the Orioles, depending on what happens with Corbin Burnes. Like I said earlier, I think there's a good chance he could end up staying with the Orioles, but depending on the market, I could easily see him going elsewhere as well. So if he goes to another team, that would open up a spot potentially for Verlander for next year. I'll also talk about the Blue Jays here. Remember a couple of years ago when Verlander was a free agent before signing back with the Astros, the Blue Jays were hot on his tails, and he even said himself that they were a top contender for his services, right? He's got his former teammate, George Springer, there. So depending on how the Blue Jays rotation shakes out, maybe Verlander could be an option there. Now, another thing with Verlander, him and his wife, Kate Upton, they recently purchased an off-season home in Florida, and the Atlanta Braves, not too far away. Max Fried, he's a free agent. I could definitely see him going elsewhere. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but if he ends up going elsewhere, maybe that could open up a spot for Verlander. And I'll go with a real outside the box one. We got the Rays. Now, this one I probably don't see happening at all, but like I said, he's got an off-season home in Florida. The Rays, I think, are going to try and compete again for next year. They got a lot of young pitching there, so maybe a veteran like Verlander could be a good fit, but I'll probably say that's a pretty slim chance. But there's one more team I want to mention, and that's his old team, the Detroit Tigers. Now, Tarek Skubal, he's been amazing this year, probably going to win the Cy Young. They got a few younger guys as well. You got Ty Madden, Casey Mize, Reese Olson, Jackson Jobe down in the minor leagues, but I feel like they could use a veteran addition here. I think Verlander would be solid for them. Now, if he's healthy, I think he'll give them solid production, but he'll also be good for the young guys there as well. We got a couple other pitchers on the market in Blake Snell and Max Fried. Now, I'm going to group these guys together because I think they're pretty similar in terms of production and how much money they're going to end up getting paid. Now, Blake Snell had a terrible start to the year this year. The numbers were atrocious. He went on the IL a couple of times, but after that, in the second half, this guy has been absolutely dominant. Take a look at the numbers in the second half here. ERA at a 1.75 over 51 and a third innings pitched. Overall, 17 starts, ERA at a 3.62, FIP at a 2.79. Now, he has the player option after this year. I definitely expect him to turn that down. He's going to go back out onto the open market, get himself a longer-term deal like he was trying to do last offseason. Let's see if Scott Boras can get him that longer-term deal for this offseason. Now, as for Max Fried, now he's had a couple of injuries in the past couple of years, but this guy is as solid as they come. 25 starts, ERA at a 3.35, FIP at a 3.50. Max Fried, when he's healthy, he's going to be great in your rotation. Now, I think there's a chance that Fried could stay with the Braves. Now, he loves it there. They love him there. But I think in the end, the money is going to be a little bit too much. I don't know if Alex Anthopoulos is going to pony up the money that I think he's going to get. When it comes to a contract between the two, baseballtradevalues.com, they're projecting 6 years, $150-ish million there, about $25 million per year. And as for Blake Snell, they're looking towards more that $30 million range per season. So I think in the end, both these guys, they're going to end up getting like 6-year deals, somewhere in that 150 to 180 range. I think that's good for them. Now, which teams would be willing to shell out this kind of money for these guys? Now, I think the Mets, you definitely have to think about them here. They got a couple of guys hitting the market from their rotation in Sean Manaea and Luis Severino. Kadai Senga will be back next year, so I think pairing either Snell or Fried would be great for this rotation. The Mets, hey, look at what they're doing this year. They're definitely going to keep that going, or they're going to look to keep that going for next year too. So I could definitely see one of those guys being options. Now, for the Texas Rangers, now we talked about them a little bit earlier with Justin Verlander. Maybe they want to go with a guy that's going to be on a longer contract. I know they got Jacob deGrom signed up for a little while there. You'd have Eovaldi, you'd have deGrom, and then you'd either have Snell or Max Fried. I think that'd be pretty solid if you ask me. Now, you always have to think about the Dodgers. I talked about Jack Flaherty earlier, so if he ends up going elsewhere, that could definitely open up something in the rotation. And hey, Blake Snell, he's a West Coast guy. I could definitely see maybe the Dodgers stepping up for him. They're always looking to spend some cash here. Maybe a reunion with the Padres for Blake Snell. I could definitely see something like that happening. Dylan Cease is going to be a free agent after next offseason, so maybe you can bring Snell back for the long haul, or maybe Max Fried. He's a California guy as well. I could definitely see something like that. Maybe my Red Sox. The Red Sox, I think they're going to look to take a step forward for next year. You got a lot of young guys coming up the pipe here, and their rotation has been a lot better this year, but I could maybe see them adding something. Now, will they want to go to the extent of Blake Snell, Max Fried? I'm not sure about that, but I think maybe you got to think about them as a possibility. Another team that could be looking to take a step forward are the Nationals. Now, I could maybe see the Nationals being a sneaky dark horse this offseason, looking to sign someone up for the long haul. Someone like Blake Snell or Max Fried, I think would be great for this rotation over the next several years. And maybe the Angels. I know we always want to think about the Angels, going out there and spending some money. They stink this year, but maybe they could lure one of these guys, again, West Coast team, maybe Blake Snell, maybe they offer him a ton of money that he can't turn down. Max Fried, same thing. I definitely could see one of these teams stepping up for either of these guys. Let's get back to the position player side of things and talk about who I think is one of the more underrated free agents of this offseason, Willy Adames. He's having a great year. He's hitting .251, on base at a .333, slugging at .470, a .122 WRC plus, 30 home runs, playing great defense at shortstop yet again, has a 4.5 Fangraph wins above replacement. Now, over the last few years, he's been anywhere from a 3 to a 4.5 Fangraph WAR. Now, I think in the end, he's going to end up getting a contract anywhere from $25 to $30 million per year, maybe even a little bit more. We'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I definitely don't see the Brewers ponying up that kind of money to bring him back, especially with all the young position players they have there. So I think Adames is going to go elsewhere. Now, when it comes to teams I think could be a good fit, I think the Braves could be an interesting fit. Now, Orlando Arcia is the shortstop there, but he's not having a good year offensively. Maybe they look to make an upgrade there. Maybe they move him in a trade. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think the Braves could be interesting there. Now, I think the Padres could be interesting. Now, Ha-Seong Kim has a mutual option. Usually mutual options don't get exercised. So I think that could open up a spot here for Willy Adames. I think that could be a pretty fun fit. And the Toronto Blue Jays, that's been a team that's been linked with Adames in the past when it comes to trade rumors. Now, you're going to have to figure out what to do with Bo Bichette. I think he ends up getting traded this offseason. I know you have a lot of young infielders there, so we'll see how it all plays out. But I could see the Blue Jays getting in on Adames. Let's wrap this up with a couple of big bats on the market, Anthony Santander and Tyler O'Neill. Santander is having himself a heck of a year, hitting .241, a .310 on base, a .516 slugging, a .132 WRC plus, 40 home runs. That's a lot of beef to add to a lineup out there. And Tyler O'Neill, he's had a lot of injuries in the last couple of years, but he's been great with the Red Sox this year, hitting .260, a .349 on base, a .545 slugging, a .142 WRC plus, 29 home runs. Now, I don't think these guys are going to end up coming back because you got a lot of young outfielders in this system that are looking to break through and get some playing time. I don't know if these teams, the Orioles and the Red Sox, are going to give the money to keep these guys, especially with all the young guys that they have coming up. Now, when it comes to contracts, Santander, he's projected, if he were to get a 4-year deal, around $20 million per year. I think that makes sense. And Tyler O'Neill, a little bit less. He's had the injuries in the last couple of years. Maybe a team can pony up a little bit more. Baseball trade values, they're projecting about $15 million-ish per year. I could see that. Maybe even getting a little higher. Maybe like 15, 18 million dollars per year for him. So with these two, I think there are going to be some teams that will very much like to bring them into their lineups. Now, the first team I'm looking at are the Pittsburgh Pirates. They need offense, for crying out loud. My goodness, this outfield has been one of the worst outfields in terms of offensive production this year. I think easily one of these guys could end up going to Pittsburgh. We got a team like the Kansas City Royals. I mean, they're right there in playoff contention. Looks like they're going to end up getting a wild card spot, but their outfield this year offensively has not been consistent this year. They're one of the worst teams offensively with their outfield, so I could easily see one of these guys going there, giving them some pop in the lineup. Maybe the Cincinnati Reds. I mean, they got a lot of younger guys there too, but they've had a lot of injuries, and the outfield has not performed very well offensively. We'll see. Maybe the Tigers, I've talked about them a couple of times here. Maybe they look to add a bit more beef to this lineup. You know, their offense was very inconsistent. They have been a little better as of late, but maybe they want to make an upgrade to this lineup. But those are my thoughts. Those are the players that I think are going to go elsewhere. Tell me in the comments, what do you think? Tell me some other players that you think are definitely going to be going elsewhere this offseason. Let me know. But everyone, that's all I got for right now. If you can on the way out, hit that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.